Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. Welcome to today's Catalyte webinar, USA versus the Netherlands, a global conversation on autism care. One size doesn't fit all. I'm Chris Larson, senior reporter for Behavioral Health Business. I've been covering the healthcare sector since 2016. I'm excited to be moderating our conversation today. But before we dive in, just a few quick housekeeping notes to help you get the most out of today's session. The main menu at the top of your screen includes all your attendee tools. These tools are movable and resizable, so you can personalize your viewing experience. If you experience any technical issues during the webinar, try closing extra browser tabs or programs and refresh the tab that you're viewing this window in. For other troubleshooting support, you can click on the Help button in the top menu or use the Ask a Question tool to reach out to us directly, and we'll have someone reach out to try to give you support. During this webinar, we'll explore how families in the Netherlands and the United States navigate their autism care journey, comparing treatment approaches, examining what supports families along the way, and discussing ways to create a more flexible and empowering experience for both children and families. We'll save 15 minutes at the end of today's webinar for audience Q&A. So please enter your questions into the Q&A window during the webinar, and our panel will answer as many of them as possible at the end of the discussion. Also, I'll turn your attention for a moment to the resources widget, where you'll find a range of downloadable materials, including white papers, clinical tools, well-being and stress scales, articles highlighting caregiver and provider perspectives, as well as links to innovative apps and past webinar recordings. A webinar survey is also going to be available at the end of this webinar, so if you could take just a minute to complete that, you'll be helping us a lot by providing your feedback. So joining us today are Dr. Doreen Samelson, Chief Clinical Officer at Catalyte, Dr. Yvette Roke, psychiatrist and leading Dutch mental health organization and developer of the Stress Autism Mate app, or SAM app. And we're also joined today by Alvin van Asselt, an autistic student and researcher focused on adult autism care in the Netherlands. Doreen, Yvette, Alvin, can you share a little bit more about your background and your roles? And Doreen, why don't you go ahead and kick us off, please?
Thank you, Chris, and I'm so happy to be here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm very happy to be able to say that I lead the Catalyte Research Institute. We've been very successful in doing a lot of research and being able to present this research around the country. And I was really thrilled when I met Yvette at a recent international research, and that kind of brought us here today to talk about this important topic.
Wonderful. And Yvette, could you introduce yourself and tell us more about your background?
Well, yes, Chris. I'm a psychiatrist from the Netherlands. I work primarily with adults with autism. I do research on stress in people with autism, and I made the Stress Autism Mate. That's an app that helps people with autism cope with their daily stress. And in my younger years, I had my Ph.D. on productivity-related side effects in antipsychotics in autistic boys. So that's in a nutshell me.
And Alvin, tell us a little bit more about yourself, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. I'm Alvin. I was diagnosed with autism back when I was 10 years old. I'm 31 years old now. I've been working as a so-called expert by experience in mental health care, providing peer support for around 10 years. And a couple of years ago, I started my Ph.D. research on stress and social pain in autistic individuals.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for sharing more of your backgrounds to get started. Okay, so let's start into the conversation in earnest. So our first question is going to be this, and Doreen, you'll kick off the conversation with the first word. In your view, how does the philosophy of autism care differ between the Netherlands and the United States?
Well, that's such an interesting question. I've been thinking about this a lot since I met Yvette. And there are some differences, but the more I think about it, there's also some comparisons in a very positive way. We have a very high prevalence rate in the United States. Based on 2022 data, we're at 1 in 31 nationally, and 1 in 19 8-year-olds have a diagnosis of ASD in California. So we have a very high prevalence rate, very large population. We probably do more ABA than they do in the Netherlands. However, of late, I think there's been a real movement to make the ABA that we do more neuroaffirming and kind of change the way we've been doing ABA. There's also a real movement, and Catalyte has really been leading this, to really look at other ways to either deliver ABA or other non-ABA interventions. We're really invested in parent-mediated interventions and other interventions that may not be as behavioral as ABA is. We still think there's a place for behavioral interventions. We have a lot of children that we serve with very severe disability, have severe or profound intellectual disability with dangerous behaviors such as pica. But what we think there needs to be is options, that one size doesn't fit all. We really need to provide families and children and adults with options.
Understood. Now, Yvette, do you have any other thoughts to share? And then after Yvette shares her insights, Alvin, do you have anything to add on this point?
Well, yeah,
That's exactly. Go on, Yvette. I'm sorry.
No, I think I was about to answer the second question. I think so. Maybe that's why the Netherlands has moved away more from the ABA approach. Can I do that? Can I go with that?
Well, yeah. So
Yeah.
as you mentioned, the moving away. So in the United States,
Yeah.
the norm is to provide high hours intensive early interventions through ABA programs, but I assume based on what you've shared so far, that's not the norm. So why is Europe and the Netherlands specifically moving away, or has moved away to some degree already, from high hour ABA?
Well, I think Doreen and I had an interesting conversation in INSAR, and we have certainly a lot of similarities. But I think Europe, including the Netherlands, is moving away from the ABA programs due to the growing concerns of their potential emotional impact they have on autistic individuals. So as I am treating adults with autism, they tell me about the traumatizing and stigmatizing experience they have with the high-intensive ABA programs at an early age. Especially the parts where they were taught not to be themselves and stop doing behavior to cope with stress and anxiety on their own way. So these programs prioritize the confirming part and not giving prioritization to the well-being of autistic individuals. So instead, we have more neurodiverse affirming approaches. These are gaining ground in the Netherlands. And that's about community inclusive support and also about person-centered interventions with an emphasis on respect for autonomy and, of course, the individual needs of the autistic people.
Great. I gotcha. And as we talk about and think about aligning individual needs, Doreen, do you see Catalyte's care as more closely aligned to the European model? And if so, why do you think that's better for American children? And then as a corollary to that, what can the United States learn from the Dutch system?
Yes, thank you. I definitely want to hear what Alvin has to say. I think we are in the United States also learning from adult autistic advocates. As I mentioned, more neuro-affirming ways to provide our behavioral interventions is very important. I think we need to get away from goals that make absolutely no sense, like eye contact or trying to get children to get away from behaviors that may actually be lowering their anxiety and their stress. This is all very important in being more neuro-affirming. And this is something that we can learn from the Netherlands. And I think Catalyte is, really committed to this and in many ways leading the way. We don't necessarily need high hours. I think the research is supporting that. We don't need these high hours ABA. And we can do, if we're going to choose ABA as an option, as one of the options, we can choose to be more neuroaffirming and lower hours. But I really want to hear what Alvin has to say about this.
Yeah, Alvin, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Yeah, I'm one of those advocates. Of course, it's also hard to say what ABA exactly is, we should ban it or how this should work. But I've undergone a lot of these kind of interventions throughout my life, throughout my childhood, and they went pleasurable to say the least. Like even if not all of them included punishments for behaviors, you're taught that the way you are isn't good, and that puts a damper on your self-esteem, and it's simply traumatic for the rest of your life. Because the rest of your life, you're like, okay, I learned this, I have to do this, and it's just so incredibly stressful. I've undergone these treatments throughout my entire life. So I'm really happy that this generation has grown up, and there are people who need to listen to us and say, like, We don't want to make the same mistake in this next generation. We want to be neuroaffirmative in every possible way. We wish to tell people that they are okay the way they are. And everyone has to learn skills, but we have to learn skills that improve their well-being all the time, and just not the way that fit it into the society and into, well, pretty much adapting to make other people's lives better.
Understood.
That's so well, Alvin.
Just a quick minor programming note that I also want to mention before we move on to the conversation. There's a question in the Q&A about whether or not this will be recorded for viewing later. Yes, it will be, and you'll be able to find that on the BHB website. And registrants to this webinar will also get the chance to have a link distributed to them. So if you want to go back to review this, or you want to share this with somebody who was not able to attend, you'll be able to do so. Okay, and back to our normal programming. Alvin, thanks a ton for those insights, especially with your lived experience. I do want to just follow up to see if there's anything else that we can share on this point before we move on. So, is there anything else to say when it comes to autism care and support? What does that look like in the Netherlands, and how does that compare to the standard of practice in the United States?
I think it's so valuable. Yeah, of course, Alvin. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Well, basically, we've moved away from the medical model. So we don't regard autism as an illness anymore that needs to be treated. We're regarding the social model, what happens in the autistic life, the misfit between the autistic person and the environment. That's where something goes wrong. That influences the well-being of autistic people. So to make them happier, of course, we can teach them skills, but generally we have to change the environment, and someone can be the way they are. And I think that shift that we're currently going through is the main difference right now between autism care in the Netherlands 10, 20 years ago and autism care right now.
And I just wanted to add that as a psychiatrist working with Alvin, I learned such a lot from him. So I think this is also a shift that we need to be aware of what people with autistic people need, and listen to them, because you cannot know if you don't listen. So Alvin teaches me really a lot about how to do it differently. So working together, that makes a big difference as well.
Absolutely.
One of the things I'd like to add, a conversation that we're having in the United States, that I think is an important conversation to have outside of the U.S. as well, is that we do have a group of people who are really severely, profoundly disabled. And I know the term profound autism is being used. It's somewhat controversial, but it is the term that's being used. There's now some specific criteria for that term. And for those families, there's been, quite a bit of conversation about the fact that, the supports that they need, are somewhat different than the supports and the needs that other autistic folks need. And I think we need to listen to that group as well. And many times what that means is listening to those caregivers. These are people that need 24/7 support and supervision for safety reasons. They have minimal language, often engage in very serious behaviors that are injurious, like pica or dangerous elopement, without the understanding about the danger involved in that elopement. And I think this is a group that we are not meeting their needs. So I just want to mention that there's been quite a bit of discussion and even controversy and back and forth between the sort of the idea of the social model of disability and the medical model of disability in the United States. I don't know if that's going on in the Netherlands or not, but that certainly has been a point of contention and conversation here in the United States.
Well, that's the same as the Netherlands.
Yeah.
I think you need to look at the individual needs. That makes all the difference, just as you pointed out.
I gotcha. And so meeting individual needs are influenced by the overarching structures of different systems. So, Yvette, I want you to start us off on this next point in our conversation. What are the autism funding structures in the Netherlands that support these kind of care alternatives? And as a corollary to that, what barriers exist in the United States that hinder similar reform?
Well, I think we have an easy job maybe in the Netherlands because all healthcare as well as autism care, is founded by the public system. So we have acts, the Health Insurance Act, the Youth Act, and the Long-Term Care Act. And these provide all people with basic care. So that's a big difference, of course, I think, to the system you are operating in.
And I would just add that I think most of the people from the U.S. who are listening to this webinar will be aware that we have a somewhat fractured system where there are differences, state differences from state to state, depending on what insurance coverage you have. You may have coverage, some coverage might be end at a certain age. In California, we don't have any age restriction. We don't have restriction on number of hours. We do have regulations about how those hours are provided or recommended in terms of whether they're delivered or not. There's regulations around that, but it varies, and it does vary by the coverage that you have. So we don't have the same kind of national healthcare system that other countries like the Netherlands have. I always am, it's always difficult to explain this to people outside of the U.S. who always, I just saw Yvette shake her head. This is always the reaction I get when I try to explain what it's like in the States, because it seems, I'm sure, so foreign to all of you who have a national health system. But it does create barriers. It creates financial barriers and geographic barriers for families and individuals.
Understood. Okay, so wanted to move this conversation on and turn to Alvin to kick us off on this next point. Alvin, can you speak to how your experience as a person with autism shaped your view of therapy and support systems?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chris. Well, basically, it's been very polarizing. As a child, I've had treatments, and my parents have had psychoeducational treatments in which we're basically told, like, he's autistic, will never achieve anything in life anymore, and this and this is wrong with him. And that has profoundly influenced our entire family system, in which after I finished high school, barely, with a lot of masking and a lot of trauma, I pretty much accepted that I couldn't do anything in life, and basically sat in my room for about 5 hours. And so it was only after I contacted the autistic community that I learned that there were a lot of more people like me who have had this internalized stigma and this low self-confidence. And I learned about autistic differences, that I'm not ill and that there's not something wrong with me. That changed my entire view on life, but it also changed my entire view on how healthcare should be and how we should prioritize neurodiversity and acceptance of someone's brain and try to work around it to increase their well-being. So I do think it's very much shaped my view, and I'm trying to assist people through peer support with that vision every day.
I gotcha. Now, I want to turn back to you, Doreen. In your view, what are the general outcome measures in the United States and Europe, and what outcome measures should clinicians and systems prioritize?
Well, unfortunately, we have not one agreed upon global outcome measure for autism, in part because it is an extremely heterogeneous population. And with our very, very high prevalence rate in California and in the United States, more heterogeneous here. I think we need to get to an agreed upon what I would call global outcome measure that everything else rolls up to. We think at Catalyte that's well-being. We've developed well-being scales, and I'll just say these scales are free for any clinician or researcher to use. You can just download them at catalyte.org. We're published on these scales and norm them. They have good psychometrics. We have translated them into a number of different languages, and we will be translating them into Dutch as well. That hasn't been done yet, but it is coming. Because we really think everything rolls up to well-being. We're open to other well-being scales or quality of life scales that might be better than ours. That's fine with us. What we think philosophically is that everything should roll up to the well-being for the individual and the family. And this, I think, will actually change the conversation about those who have very profound disability versus those who have a different experience as an autistic person, and achieve the kinds of things that Alvin and people on my team have achieved as autistic people, because it is individualized, and is well-being for that person is very important, and we need to look at the family, the well-being for the family as well, particularly for children or for those who are really need that 24/7 support. So, but at this point, we really don't have agreement, and I'd be interested to hear what Yvette has to say, but I don't think we have agreement either nationally here in the U.S. or internationally on outcome measures.
And Yvette, we'll start with your insights, and then Alvin, if you have any others to share, we'll turn to you at that time. Yvette, go ahead.
No, I think I agree with Doreen. I have not something really to add on it. I think it's really important to look at well-being as the primary outcome. And I know that the severity of autism doesn't say anything about the well-being. So there are other factors that make people feel well about themselves or not. And the severity of the autistic traits is not one of them. But Alvin can tell us more about that.
Yeah, Alvin, any thoughts?
That's more from my PhD research. Indeed, that there's pretty much no association between strength of autistic traits and well-being and stress. So there's something else going on. I think that everybody on the spectrum has their extreme challenges. If you're, what we call then high-functioning autistic, I don't like the word, but I'll use it. You have some challenges in this you have to work and that you have to provide for yourself. Maybe if you're profoundly autistic, in some ways you're being more protected from society, and you just don't always realize your position in society. So yes, everyone has their challenges and everyone deserves personalized support.
Understood. So let's actually talk about dealing with those supports, and specifically, perhaps we'll learn more about how to deal with stress. Yvette, I want to turn to you and talk a little bit about the SAM app. So can you tell us about the SAM app and how it supports autistic individuals differently than traditional therapies?
Yes, I can tell you something about it. I love to tell you something about it. In 2018, I lost a young boy with autism due to the stress of daily life. And I thought, well, we need to do something about that. So with my other clients, patients, we co-created a tool to help them understand the daily stressors. Which activity gives stress, which activities give support and pleasure. And by giving the people 2, 3 to 4 times a day questionnaires about that, the activities related to how they feel in their own language, in their own visuals, in their own feel and touch within an app. We developed it in a design thinking process. They received this tool. And at the moment, SAM is scientifically validated, and it's available in 34 countries in 7 languages, helping a lot of people with autism just doing that. Getting to know their own manual, in fact, seeing what is going right, what is going wrong, and how can I change this a little around. So it helps you lowering your perceived stress and with your coping self-efficacy in a way. So people come from passive coping, feeling angry, going through your room, not being able to interact with other people, to active coping, seeking help. So, and today we just got great news that our latest SAM article and randomized controlled trials published in Autism. So today's really a happy day also for us. This is something about the SAM app, and every day thousands of people use it. So I hope, my biggest wish is that we can make everybody in the United States also happy with using SAM, because it's free, it's accessible. Everybody has a smartphone. You can do it on your own, and parents can do it for their children of adolescents if they don't want to do it, to gain some better insight in what goes right and what goes wrong and how you can intervene a little. I can talk for hours, but I stop here.
Yeah, I can appreciate the both the passion and the know-how, and congratulations on getting that published. But I do want to shift to another specific question and articulate this if we haven't already. How might SAM and other innovative practices in Dutch autism care be scalable or adaptable to the United States context?
Well, I
start off there, and then Doreen will transition to you.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Me first? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Well, I think it's really, if you are culturally adapting an app to a different context, you need to be aware of the context you are doing it in. So there needs to be a research phase to adapt it to the different autistic communities in the United States. Because I think maybe there are a lot of different United States communities with autism who differ. So you need somebody in the clinical, the treatment setting, and you need autistic voices in the community to work together. And together we can make the SAM fit for the American audience. And then you need somebody, an ambassador, somebody who will stand up and say, well, I embrace the SAM app and I will make sure that we will keep it and we will keep it safe for years, because we are developing in each country with the autistic community around it. So you need resources for that. Dus we need a leader who can connect with the autistic community and also has some access to resources to implement it. In short, I think that's needed. And of course, I'm looking at Doreen, hopefully.
Well, I'll jump in now because this was what started our conversation at INSAR, because I'm very excited about what they've developed in the SAM app. And, Catalyte has developed, and we have, and we actually were presenting at the INSAR, which is International Research, Autism Research Conference, our Compass Behavioral, which is a self-directed, manualized intervention for youth and adults, autistic youth and adults, where they choose their own goals and they are, they're running the show, and it's a coaching program, right? So they're getting coaching. And I was so excited because I think the philosophy, much of the philosophy is very similar to the SAM app. And so we will be talking more about how we can come together and partner. I think this is the kind of innovation that we need. And it's about self-determination, right? I mean, one of the things that we found in our well-being research is that self-determination is an extremely important aspect of well-being. And when you think about it, a lot of the criticism of ABA from autistic adults like Alvin has been the lack of self-determination. People saying, you can't do this, you have to do that. You have to be this way, you can't be that way, right? And, removing the autonomy and the self-determination from the child or even the adult. And, we know that self-determination is not the only thing that's connected to well-being, but it is one of the very important factors involved in well-being. And when you're able to see for yourself, these things impact my mental health, how I'm feeling I want to feel better. If I want to improve my mental health, I can do these other things. I choose that. Then, that's about self-determination and autonomy. And that is, I think, connected to well-being. So we're very excited to continue our conversation and see where it goes. But I think it's impressive. And the English version that I heard has Alvin's voice. He does a great job on the video that I watched that explains all about the app.
Gotcha, but we're going to turn to you to start off the next part of our conversation. How does collaboration with autistic adults inform research and treatment development in the Netherlands?
Just to be sure, it was a question for me, right?
Yes, Alvin.
All right. Well, in the Netherlands, we're pioneering it. We've adopted the recovery movements, as we call it, which were basically some old patients who said, like, you didn't treat us well enough, and you only focused on external outcomes and not our individual well-being and our self-determination. And they've gained some access in healthcare. And starting in 2009, we've had our first associate degree as a so-called expert by experience. Now, I was still an early bird. I had to travel a lot, but right now I only have to move like 10 kilometers from my house to get that degree if I wanted to again. So one major thing that we've done was accepting lived experience as a sort of knowledge equal to scientific knowledge and equal to clinicians' knowledge. So we work together as a team from 3 views. It formed our practice. And that's changed a lot because we've moved from these external outcomes to what clinicians find important, as someone has recovered or someone's doing great, what people themselves find important. And I think these power dynamics have changed. That's the fact we are able to speak up and we are being listened to has done so much. And that has caused the shift towards the social model and the focus on the changing of the environment instead of the person. But maybe, Yvette, you can add something to that.
Well, you did a really good job explaining that. But I think it's really true what you say. We need to have a true balance between the 3 domains. And I think we need to listen to the people with the lived experience and the experts by experience in what they think is missing and what they think is needed. And everything that happened has impacted them the most. So it's them that should lead us into a new direction. And then we can gain balance between the 3 domains. And then we can set really a way to a new way of thinking and a new way of, making sure everybody will recover and have a better well-being. And that's different measures than, the depression scale or the anxiety scale. Also important, but more important is that the person themselves are happy with the way their life is going. So I think this is a really big thing to learn for all the doctors. I'm a doctor, and the medical model is really, we are taught in the medical model, so we are just thinking like we have been taught all these years, and now we have to think in another direction. That's a big change. So I think we need to be educated, and people like Alvin can educate us. He has educated me. And I really love working together because we gain insights from each other. So he makes me a better clinician. And my patients are, of course, more happy because they get better treatment.
Good.
And we need to, and I think I want to add something more because it sounds really easy maybe, but I think it's our job to make sure that they're on the table, that they can discuss with us, but also make the decision with us. So we make place for them. Not only say, hey, come join the discussion. No, get really a chair at the table on decision making. And we can make that happen.
I gotcha. And that actually translates us, helps transition us to the other part of our conversation we're going to move on to. And we'll discuss this question now. How can systems address the imbalance that often exists between providers, parents, and autistic individuals in the care setting? You already hinted at some of that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, I think we need to make sure that they get a place on every decision-making level in treatment, in organizations. So if their voices are heard in every level, then it intertwines, and then you have the 3 domains working together. But if you leave it out, it will never become effective or can grow. So I think the main thing is making place, giving way, and change the way we look at things. But that's sometimes really a little bit difficult. But also for me in the beginning, because I was used to being the one in charge, so to say, yeah. But now you have to be horizontal in discussing with the people you were treating first. So that's really a shift in thinking. And I think we need to educate people about that. To start with the people going to school, university, nursery school, all the levels working in medical and societal sectors. So we can educate them about that. And then it will become normal.
Understood. At least in the United States, we have very powerful institutions that can be really hard to change. 2 of those being insurance and policy systems. And I want to turn to you with this next question. How can insurance and policy systems in the United States evolve to support more individualized, family-informed, and neurodiversity affirming approaches?
Well, I think there's some discussion about that, and there's some movement towards that in some organizations. Again, we kind of have a fractured system. We have a research institute, and we've got an advisory committee, and we're just putting together we had an initial advisory committee that helped us put the research institute together because it's a rather new research institute. And now we're really getting going. So we're just putting a new advisory committee. We made sure, to have autistic adults on there, parent of a child with profound autism, researchers, clinicians, just trying to, a pediatrician, just trying to get, everybody in the room. And I think Yvette is right. If you don't make that intentional, you don't bring people into the room and make sure you've got space for them, then that's not going to happen. I also think, hiring people on your team, being intentional about hiring autistic researchers, for example, in my case, very important. And hiring up clinicians who are autistic when you're able to do that, very important. But also, I just want to say again, so I have kind of a special place in my heart for those parents who, are parents of the more severely, profoundly autistic individuals, to make sure that they're in the room too, and that we hear their, what their needs are for their families. I think that that's also very important, so that we're getting, really all aspects of the community, because if we're going to really make sure that we're meeting the individual needs of, really in a way we have these subpopulations within, the broader population. I sometimes use myself as an example as a wheelchair user. I can't speak for quadriplegics. I'm not a quadriplegic, and I certainly couldn't speak for event-dependent quadriplegic, right? That's not my experience. I don't, use a ventilator. I'm not a quadriplegic. I don't need somebody that's going to feed me and bathe me because I am able to do that for myself. I can certainly give you some stories about how my wheelchair has been broken 3 different times in the last 2 years by airlines, because I travel a lot, or how, maybe curb cuts are sometimes bad. But I really can't speak to the experience of somebody who has ALS, for example, or, is event-dependent quadriplegic. So I think we do have to make sure we get all voices in the room. And I don't think we're there yet, but I think we can get there if we are intentional about it. And that's the message. We need to ask ourselves, have we really got the voices in the room? And then when we have the people in the room, are people like me and Yvette sort of leading, because we're there, we're the professional people, we're going to lead it. That's not the way to do it. That's the way we're trained. Hard to say, but that's not the way to do it. So we have to really stop and think. And I think conversations between those of us who've sort of been trained in the sort of old way are very important, so we can kind of challenge each other if we slip into that old style of thinking. Wait a minute, Doreen, that's not what we agreed to, is also very important.
Understood. And Doreen, you've already highlighted, several cultural but also systemic changes in the United States generally that would be needed to get some more individualized approaches. Are there any others that you would call out or discuss here to help the United States system move beyond high-intensity ABA as the default approach to autism treatment?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and some of us are really working on this, I'm working on an article right now that's really a invitation to talk about these issues in the United States, to bring people together who really believe high-hour ABA is the way to go. They have something to say. They may have some understanding that I don't understand. I have something to say. I have understanding they don't. We have to sit down and talk, and we have to share ideas, and we have to be willing to really hear each other And what I really want to do is, do more co-research and really be willing to say, okay, I'm going to look at the research. I'm going to do research with you, even though I think, this is the way it should be. And I believe that, and you believe this other thing. Well, let's really do a well-designed research study together and see what we get, and then discuss the results. Because, I think lots of times the real answer is more towards the middle. And, we tend in the United States to get very, sort of this way or that way. It's, we try to answer complex questions as yes or no. And probably that's a simplistic way to do it. So I really want to have more conversation that isn't just finger pointing. And we've had a lot of that in the United States around ABA, to be clear. And I don't think we need to do that. I think we can come together and really have conversations that result in meaningful change for families and individuals. And we can learn from the Netherlands, and we can learn from other countries. We can learn from Canada. We're doing some work with a Canadian group right now. We can learn from everybody, and they can learn from us.
Understood. So we're going to shift our focus from the conversation to getting to the questions that were submitted during the conversation. So if there is a question that anybody in the audience wants us to consider taking on, you still have a couple minutes here to submit them to the Q&A, but we're going to go ahead and turn our attention there. The first one that we're going to address is about the SAM app, Yvette. So the question is this, at what age can the app start with parents using, of course? The question is, are there about any age restrictions or age recommendations before the SAM can be used?
No, I can say a child of 8 years old can use it by itself if it's able to read and understand it, and parents can use it whenever they see it fit. The child is doing activities or whatever, then parents can start using it by seeing, or schools, which activities are going well and which activities are not going that well, so they have some insight. So I think, well, if the child is just born, it's not that good to do, but from the age of when they start walking and doing things, I think you can do it as a parent, but I hope as many parents will let their children do it by themselves if they can. We also have a junior version of SAM. This is co-created with young people with autism, and we included 12 to 18-year-olds, and they helped us make this junior version of SAM, which is less other language and more time to answer the questionnaires, and also some tips to prepare for stressful occasions. So it's a bit different than SAM, but also still the same in how it's set up. I hope that was a good answer.
Yeah, I believe that addressed the question at hand. And if, again, we have just a few minutes, if the question asker has anything else to follow up, send that question into the Q&A box. Okay, I want to shift to another question. This one's about helping to inform our US-based audience just a little bit more about what the economy around care looks like in the Netherlands. So I'll just go ahead and read the question here verbatim. In the U.S., autism care is delivered by a combination of small and large for-profit and nonprofit organizations. Can we learn more about the makeup of Dutch organizations that deliver care?
Yes, I think so. Alvin, you can also add if you like. I'll start. I think most companies in the Netherlands are non-profit. So we have large mental health and smaller mental health organizations, and they offer treatments, and it's all in the healthcare system of the Netherlands. And then we also have a small number of commercialized hospitals or treatment places, which you can pay yourself if you want treatment there. But for the main part, it's non-profit, and it's also by region. If you're under 18, then it's like the city that arranges the caretaking. And if you're over 18, it's the central government, the Health Insurance Act for the government of the Netherlands. I hope this is a good question, a good answer. But Alvin, did I miss something?
Well, apart from the treatment centers, we also have these organizations funded with money from the government who is basically consisting of only autistic people, just reaching out saying, hey, if you need our help, just come to us. Even if you're a healthcare provider or if you're a treatment center, if you're autistic yourself, you are safe here and you can just get any advice you need. Even for researchers, we reach out and we say, if you wish to collaborate with us, we're here. So that's government funded. They really are supporting these kind of peer support initiatives we have over here. And I do think they're a great addition to traditional mental health care.
Is it fair to say, Alvin and Yvette, that with the exception of a few private pay companies, that everything is paid for by the government, either by the city or the federal government, that it's all nationalized through the government? Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Not entirely free, and you have to pay healthcare insurance as well. Of course, it takes into account that the care itself is free, so you have to pay a little bit more per month. But generally, it's payable for most people in the Netherlands.
Yeah, you must have healthcare, so you cannot say I won't pay it and I won't have it. No, you're obliged to have a healthcare insurance.
Okay.
And then you have an own risk to pay, and you can choose how big that risk is. The bigger the risk, the lower the policy pay. So, but it's basic care, mental health care, all paid for.
Understood. And there's been a couple of other questions that have come in about the SAM app in the Q&A box, and looking at just a quick reminder that you can actually find a link to the app and about the app in the resources tab. So if you can locate that on your screen, you're just a click away from being able to dive into more information, just to answer all the questions that have come in, and hopefully find those answers on those links that we provided. So I want to shift to a question that we have in the Q&A. In this one, I think Doreen, we'll direct this one your way. So what are your thoughts on the BACB's black and white stance on parents and caregivers serving as their child's direct provider of ABA and considering it a dual relationship?
I wouldn't look at it that way. When we talk about parent-mediated ABA or other parent-mediated interventions, what we're talking about is teaching the parent to change the way they parent. No one's saying, sit down, mom or dad or grandma, whoever the caregiver is, and spend 2 hours, doing, treatment with your child. I mean, no one, first of all, I wouldn't have done that. Who would do that? It's like changing the way you parent, using these interventions, which are well-studied, empirically based, to help get your child off to school during bedtime, during dinner time. We're not talking about, a lot of contingent punishment. We're talking about really helping your child develop communication and language, helping them with daily living skills. And you're just infusing that in your parenting. And that's what we're talking about. It's not a dual relationship. And I want to be clear, and we have this all over our website. No one is paying parents to do this. They're not trained to be RBTs or any, other kind of certified paraprofessional. And it works. And we have good data that it works. Ruby has 20 years of data. Our caregiver-led ABA has good data. It's not a fit for every family. Nothing is a fit for every child in every family, but it is a fit for many families, and it works.
I gotcha. So we're going to go to another question that is a little bit of a shift in topic. So just everybody be prepared. So we're going to shift gears just a little bit here. What are your recommendations for families dealing with a new diagnosis in a young child under the age of 5? Other than, of course, we talked about the app for support, but what are some of the recommendations on how we ought to approach that? And Doreen, why don't you get us get us started on that
I can get started. Yeah.
the perspective, Yvette, and then of course Alvin can have the final word on that question.
Yeah. With any kind of diagnosis with a child, I think, first of all, we want to be realistic with the parent if there's things that the parent needs to know. But we want to look at the strengths. But also, it's too general to say in this world a diagnosis of ASD. That child could have a major genetic disorder. We're referring to that in the United States as syndromic autism. So, for example, if that child does have a deletion on chromosome 22, which is also associated with things like type 1 diabetes and heart problems, we're going to want to address that. Parents need to be educated about those things. But we also want to talk about the fact that their child can have good well-being regardless of the type of disability that they had. But we also, there's a fine line between being maybe realistic about what the parent can expect and, letting them know that you can have good well-being and be a disabled person, and also not trying to have tell the future, right? You don't have a crystal ball, you can't tell the future, right? Sometimes if the child is 3 and they've got some word, they've got some language, boy, that is great. We know we're probably, even if they're not talking to me, if the parent reports that they've got some language, even if it's good receptive language, but they're not, talking a lot, I'm happy because we've got a kid whose brain is being stimulated by language, and that's a real plus. And I'm going to really want to talk about that strength. But there's a lot we don't know when the child is really young. The younger they are, the less we are going to be able to predict. So we want to be careful. We want to let the parent know that there's lots of support available, and be honest about the fact that we can't answer necessarily all their questions because we just don't know, particularly if the child is, really young, like 2, right? It's really hard to tell. And Yvette, you may have it. Alvin, you may have an answer to that question as well.
I think it's interesting to let Alvin answer the question, looking maybe back on what would have your parents needed, and you yourself, of course.
I think that the older you get, you move from well-being being determined by inherent autistic traits to the way society responds to your autistic traits. And I do wish that my parents, especially when I was too young to reflect on it myself, would have been helped from this neurodiversity affirmative approach, that there's an evolutionary reason that autistic people still exist on this planet. They have a purpose. They're all right the way they can be, and not in the way that they were taught that, something's wrong with me and maybe I can be cured someday, because it profoundly impacted me. It profoundly impacted the way my parents looked at me. And I think it profoundly delayed the time I needed to flourish and experience well-being on this world.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. That, we're not talking about curing the autistic traits. We may be talking about treating, co-occurring conditions that we see in a lot of our kids that have co-occurring medical conditions, seizure disorders, heart problems, and the other things that we see. Yeah.
I gotcha. Another question from the Q&A, Alvin, is actually directed. So we'll start with you, and then in this order, we'll go Yvette and then Doreen on this particular question. So it's got some additional context, so I'll read out the entirety of this question. With regards to neuroaffirming approaches, Alvin mentioned changing the environment and not the individual. Do you believe it's neuroaffirming to teach our clients the skills to be able to use them if needed? For example, if the client is taught the skill to do it in society if needed, but taught that at home, they can engage in their preferred way. Sorry, text is a little small. I'm curious what environmental changes can be made from your perspective, and where the line is for members in society who are not as kind and open to changing their own behavior?
Well, let me just start with an example, because the moment I received the most treatment was the first year in high school. And it was basically when I couldn't handle it at all. I was just crying and screaming everywhere. And the biggest problem was the problem behavior I had was that I had to go to the bathroom all the time just because of the stress and everything. And so basically my tutor who was supposed to help me, they forced me to learn how to wear a diaper in order to survive at school. And that's just one example that has taught me, well, when you're at school, never mention it's going wrong. Don't show your tears, just mask it and just try to be as normal as possible. Even though that made me survive high school, it traumatized me so much that I couldn't go to school anymore for about 7-8 years. And even then, for university in the Netherlands, you don't even need a high school degree. So it basically, in my opinion, was nothing. So the thing is always, when you're talking about teaching skills to continue living in society, to get along with school, with work, what are the benefits and what are the costs for the person? And I think that the older the child gets, the more they have lived experience, the more they can decide what's good for themselves. Do you have anything to add, Yvette?
I totally agree with you, Alvin. And I think it's also about what the individual themselves want. So if you want to do some stuff in another way, in social settings or whatever, because you like to do it that way yourself, then that's fine. If you know what the costs are for yourself and you take that chance. But if you don't want to do it, then the environment or the people shouldn't force you to do it. So we have a lot of these issues in the working space with my clients. So they go to work and some bosses are really good in understanding and create the surroundings when people flourish. But we also have a lot of people, unfortunately, who need to be in noisy rooms, in a lot of meetings, need to be live somewhere and not online. Like Alvin, we had this discussion together at work. We work at the same place, at the mental health organization. And in the one team, Alvin needed to come to work to do his work. Well, in my team, we say, you don't need to be there. You can do it hybrid. You can do it online. So why should we tell you to go there and you lose all your energy and you feel drained after that? Why? So I think it's really important, and I hope you don't mind that I gave this example. I think it's really important that you, that where you can make life easier by doing some simple things. Just by saying, hey, make your own work schedule. Hey, you want to work from home? Fine. Meetings are very stressful for you. Let's see, how can we work around that? Okay, but you have to be in this meeting. Okay, then take 2 green blocks in the SAM app to recover from that. So it's like that, I think. You know, if you need to have a different surrounding many times when you have an autistic brain, because it's not the amount of energy that normal living costs, and I hate the word normal, is double for people with autism. So we need to be aware of that. It's like you call it top sport in the Netherlands when you're doing sports on an Olympic level. Well, that's not life.
Yeah.
People, so we need to be aware of that, I think. And I think we need to tell the people themselves this also, because then all the people I speak, they think they need to live up to the other people they see doing things, need to do the same things and the same amount of things. But I say, well, it's not the same. You cannot compare the two. You need to look at your own path. What do you want to achieve? And you will achieve it, but maybe you have to take a few more steps and take more time, but you will get there.
And Eva, that's a strong thought to end the conversation on. Just looking at time constraints, we're going to have to wrap up and say goodbye. So I want to just thank everybody for joining us today. I also want to give a special thanks to Doreen, Yvette, and Alvin for partnering with us on this essential topic of global autism treatment. Please remember to take the time to review the survey that's going to come up here in just a minute. And also want to invite you all to download the collection of the practical resources I mentioned at the top of the webinar: white papers, clinical tools, well-being scales, and other program insights. Your feedback and your engagement is very much appreciated. I'm Chris Larson, and we'll see you next time.